No wall could protect against them. No guard could stop them. Meet the first terrorist organization in history, the most loyal disciples of death. Episode 1. The Assassins, Hashshashins. Hassan-i Sabbah was not an ordinary preacher or a reckless adventurer. He was educated in the most advanced scientific centers of his time. He was an expert in mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and religious studies. He once served as a high-ranking bureaucrat in the Seljuk court, and that insider experience allowed him to understand the system's weakest points better than anyone else. He knew that confronting armies with another army would be suicide. His plan was different. He intended to move war from the battlefield to palaces, from open fields to the dark corridors of the human mind. Sabbah was searching for an impregnable central base from which he could operate his cause. His eyes turned to Alamut, a fortress perched at the summit of the Elburz Mountains. The year was 1090. Sabbah did not turn every follower into an assassin. The criteria he used to select his fedayeen were harsher than even modern special forces training. He evaluated not only physical strength, but intelligence. A fedai had to be able to speak Latin like a Christian monk, understand court protocol like a palace official, or wait patiently for months like a wandering dervish. Those with strong family ties were eliminated. A fedai was to have only one family, the old man of the mountain, Hassan-i Sabbah. His only home was the cause itself. To send young men to their deaths, Sabbah had to offer them something more valuable than life itself: paradise. Selected youths were drugged with opium-based substances and put to sleep. When they awoke, they found themselves in magnificent hidden gardens within the valleys of Alamut. Flowing wine, beautiful women, fruit trees, and exotic animals surrounded them. They were made to believe they were standing in the very paradise described in the Quran. After several days, they were drugged again and returned to the cold stone chambers of the fortress. When they awoke, the memory of that brief heaven locked them into a single purpose. Sabbah would whisper to them, "That place you saw was paradise, and the only way back is to destroy the enemy I command and die as a martyr." The fedayeen were not taught merely how to wield a dagger. They were trained like actors. They had to speak the language of their target flawlessly. They could live for years as Christian monks in monasteries, ordinary soldiers in the Seljuk army, or merchants in crowded marketplaces. The year was 1092. The great Seljuk Empire stood at the height of its power. Behind that power was a single mind, Vizier Nizam al-Mulk. Hassan-i Sabbah knew that the Seljuk state could not be destroyed without eliminating him. Nizam al-Mulk was not just a bureaucrat. He was the author of Siyasat-Nam and the architect of the state's order. Killing him meant paralyzing the empire's nervous system. Sabbah assigned this sacred mission to a young fedai named Abu Tahir Arani. For months, Arani observed the vizier's routines, routes, and weakest moments. He did not act like an assassin, but like nothing at all. From the crowd emerged a ragged dervish, holding a petition and murmuring a false complaint. Nizam al-Mulk stopped. As he reached for the paper, time seemed to freeze. The dagger that sprang from beneath the document pierced the heart of an empire. The fedai did not flee. He did not tremble. As the vizier collapsed in blood, he simply watched. That night, not only a vizier died, the backbone of a state was broken. The assassins were no longer just a sect. They had become a nightmare that robbed kings of sleep. The year was 1192. The Crusades were at their most chaotic. Conrad of Montferrat, preparing to ascend the throne of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, stood at the peak of his power. But his fate rested between the lips of a man in the Syrian mountains. Two assassin fedayeen disguised themselves as Christian monks for 6 months. They read the Bible, prayed in churches, and earned the trust of those closest to Conrad. On April 28, Conrad was returning from dinner when the two monks approached him with a letter. As he stopped to receive it, 2 daggers emerged from beneath their robes and plunged into his chest. The assassins' targets were not limited to viziers and kings. They even attempted to kill one of the greatest heroes of the Islamic world, Saladin. This attack marked the peak of their audacity and infiltration capability. One night, as Saladin rested in his tent, men he believed to be his own guards drew their daggers. Thanks to his helmet, Saladin narrowly survived a blow to the head. He was forced to fight hand-to-hand with his own protectors. Saladin survived the attack, but he realized he was no longer safe anywhere. When Saladin moved moved to destroy the assassins' central bases, he encountered one of the most iconic acts of psychological warfare in history. One morning, he awoke to find a poisoned dagger and a note beside his bed. "If we did not wish you well, that dagger would not be in the ground, but in your soft chest." Saladin withdrew his army. The greatest conqueror of his age was forced to negotiate, feeling the breath of an invisible hand on his neck. The assassins' 170-year reign of terror came to an end in 1256, when they collided with the most destructive force of the era, the Mongols. Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, ignored assassination threats. He answered psychological warfare with total annihilation. Alamut was besieged and battered with the heaviest siege engines of the time. When the fortress fell, Hulagu left no stone standing. The most mysterious library in history was burned. All the organization's secrets turned to ash. The Mongols buried not just a fortress, but an entire doctrine. Alamut fell, but the methods survived. The assassins laid the foundations of targeted assassination, cell-based organization, and psychological warfare as we know them today. They were the first and bloodiest proof in history that not armies, but sheer willpower could change the world.
Sometimes a person is left with only two choices: to die or to kill. Throughout history, this has been the truth behind the hands that held daggers. And Jerusalem is one of the cities that has witnessed those hands more than any other. Centuries passed, blood dried, stones grew old, yet Jerusalem still stands as an unshareable inheritance. Because history is the most dangerous bridge between yesterday and today. What was once an illusion becomes reality. The 1st century AD, Judea was under the heavy oppression of the Roman Empire. Taxes had increased, religious sensitivities were ignored, and the people began to feel enslaved. Worse still, some Jews cooperated with Rome, fueling even greater anger. It was in this environment that one of history's first organized assassination groups emerged, the Sicarii. They took their name from the short, sharp dagger they carried, the Sika. The word Sicarii literally meant those who kill with a dagger. To them, Roman rule was not merely political, it was a crime against God. Even paying taxes was considered idolatry, because the coins bore the image of Caesar. Any system governed by human authority was to be rejected. Only God could rule. The foundations of this radical ideology were laid by Judas of Galilee. He broke away from the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Essenes, choosing a fourth and the harshest path. This belief system did not stop at opposing Rome. It declared all human-made systems of rule as enemies. After Judas's death, his teachings became a source of legitimacy for the Sicarii. When one of Rome's governors entered Jerusalem carrying Roman symbols that violated Jewish religious law, the people revolted. Soon after, the seizure of temple funds ignited public fury once again. Rome was now openly defiant. It was amid this chaos that the Sicarii stepped onto the stage. They did not kill at night. They killed in broad daylight, during festivals, celebrations, at the very heart of crowds. Daggers hidden beneath heavy robes were suddenly drawn and driven into a throat or a heart. As the victim collapsed, the assassin blended into the crowd, shouting, crying, appearing like everyone else. The best way to conceal a murder was to stand at its very center. Their first targets were Jewish elites who collaborated with Rome. The assassination of a high priest proved how deeply the organization had infiltrated society. Fear spread rapidly through Jerusalem. People began to distrust even their closest friends. Panic became a weapon more powerful than death itself. Over time, the Sicarii moved beyond assassinations. Kidnappings began. Ransoms were collected. The organization grew stronger and larger. Eventually, they seized Masada Fortress. High, isolated, and nearly unreachable, it would become a legend. Much like Alamut would centuries later for the Hashshashin. The group's leader, Menahem, was charismatic and ruthless. He dreamed of a great Jewish revolt, but Rome did not remain idle. Agents infiltrated the group. Traps were set. With Menahem's assassination, the organization suffered a devastating blow. His successor, Eleazar, could not stop its decline. As Rome regained strength, the Jewish people were divided. When the Temple of Jerusalem was destroyed, the Sicarii saw it as God's punishment. Only one refuge remained, Masada. When the Roman army laid siege to the fortress, there was no escape. Eleazar told his followers that surrender meant slavery. To them, freedom meant resisting to the final breath, and a decision was made, death over submission. First, all valuables were burned. Then families said their farewells. And one of the most horrifying mass suicides in history began. Lots were drawn. Some killed the others. The last man killed those who remained, and then himself. That night, 960 people, women and children included, lost their lives at Masada. When Roman soldiers entered the fortress the next day, they found only silence. Only 2 women and a few children, who had managed to hide, lived to tell what had happened. The Sicarii eventually vanished from history, but their methods did not. Assassination, fear, infiltration, psychological warfare. Many terrorist organizations we know today, knowingly or not, followed the path they opened. Their names were forgotten, but the shadow of the dagger is still with us. The silent army of death. Forget the armies you know, the great wars, and the bloody battlefield raids. The most effective assassination cult in history didn't spill a single drop of blood for 600 years. Yet they left behind 2 million corpses. Their weapon wasn't a sword, but a piece of silk. Their targets weren't enemies, but their own friends. They were the ones who had already dug your grave while walking right beside you. The Thuggees. Welcome to the greatest empire of serial killers in history. Here, hospitality is merely the moment your grave is being dug. These men were not mere killers. They were disciples. To them, killing wasn't a crime. It was a sacred ritual that saved the world from destruction. They believed they were the earthly shadows of the goddess Kali. Their faith was so twisted that strangling someone to death was seen as saving the soul. Their most terrifying rule was their professionalism. Shedding blood was strictly forbidden. They believed every drop of blood spilled would give birth to a new demon. Thus, they made death silent, clean, and absolute. The thugs wouldn't attack a caravan. They would become a part of it. They would walk the path with you for weeks, share your bread, and laugh with your children until that ominous moment when their leader looked to the sky and gave the secret signal. The journey, be it a jackal's howl or a bird's cry, every thug would materialize behind his pre-selected victim. Within seconds, yellow scarves would tighten around necks, knots would be cinched, and everyone in the caravan would collapse simultaneously. Not a single scream was ever allowed to escape. One was not made a thug, one was born a thug. This bloody craft was a sacred legacy passed from father to son. Men who were the most respected farmers of the village or the most devout shopkeepers by day transformed into flawless executioners when the hunting season arrived. A child would learn the true purpose of the scarf in his father's hands for the first time at age 13 by witnessing a live execution. Tying that first knot was the moment childhood ended, and he became a soldier of Kali. A single grand act? No, the greatest act of the Thuggees was silently devouring an entire continent for 6 centuries. Thousands of caravans vanished on the roads of India. Tens of thousands of merchants disappeared without a trace. No one could find the bodies because the thugs were masters of the grave diggers. The victim would enter the earth before drawing their last breath, and the ground would be covered with such mastery that even if an entire army marched over it, they would never know a corpse lay beneath. Forget the armies you know. This organization set an entire century on fire with a single bullet. They didn't just kill a man, they killed the old world. When Gavrilo Princip pulled the trigger, that bullet didn't just pierce a prince's heart. It sent 15 million people to their graves and empires, to the scrap heap of history. Their official name was Unification or Death. Founded in 1911 within the shadows of the Serbian army, they were the purest and bloodiest form of nationalism. Their logo said it all: a grenade, a dagger, a vial of poison, and a skull. This wasn't just a symbol, it was the death kit every member carried. The brain of the organization was Dragutin Dmitrievich, codenamed Apis, the Bull, a ghost who toppled kings and sent the youth to their deaths. Candidates swore an oath in a pitch-black room, hand on a cross and a pistol. Their vow was simple: the only price for betrayal was a silent death. They handpicked their assassins, young, nationalist, and mostly suffering from tuberculosis. For these dying boys, assassination was a chance to leave a bloody mark. Every assassin was given a gun, a bomb, and a vial of cyanide. The organization left no witnesses, only bodies, June 28, 1914. Sarajevo's streets were sunny, but the air smelled of gunpowder. 6 Black Hand assassins stood waiting along the route. Through a series of errors, the Archduke's car stopped right in front of Gavrilo Princip. He saw the bloody opportunity fate offered and stepped forward. 2 shots were fired. The first destroyed an empire, the second killed peace. It was the start of the greatest suicide mission in history. When Princip was caught, he was smiling. He knew those bullets had condemned the entire world to 4 years of hell. The Black Hand taught us one thing. Sometimes a single secret society can do what millions of soldiers cannot. Welcome to history's deadliest legacy. Here, hospitality is merely the moment your grave is being dug. The Ku Klux Klan, the ghosts of White Death. Forget the mysterious cults of distant lands. The monster I am about to describe hides in your neighbor's basement. The kind neighbor who smiles at you during the day, puts a white sack over his face at night, and goes on a hunt. This is the story of the Invisible Empire, the greatest shame in American history. Sit back and pay close attention, because here, hospitality is merely the moment your grave is being dug. The year was 1865. In Tennessee, 6 former officers thought they were starting a social club out of the bitterness of defeat. But what they started that night soon turned into a nightmare for millions. They dressed in white sheets because they claimed to be the ghosts of soldiers who died in the war. Fear was their greatest weapon, and with these masks, they blinded justice. They gave themselves names like wizards, dragons, and giants. Their goal was clear: to erase everyone who was not like them from the face of the earth and establish absolute white supremacy. By the 1920s, this organization reached 4 million members. We are talking about 15% of the US population. They were no longer hiding. They were putting on a show of force in the streets of Washington. The police were among them. The judges were among them. In those years, justice in America was not decided in a courtroom, but in the dark holes of a white hood. At night, they would wrap their horses' hooves in cloth, slip silently into villages, and set houses on fire. If you saw a burning cross at your door, there was no salvation left. Their greatest act was a wave of terror spanning 150 years. They hung people in the forests like strange fruit from the trees. For them, lynching was a Sunday afternoon pastime. Burning crosses were not just a sign, they were a symbol of a twisted belief that even God approved of this hatred. This massive structure rotted from the inside. Horrific murders and rape scandals involving their leaders shattered the organization's moral masks and revealed their true faces. Today, those massive ceremonies are over, but the hatred is still there. They are waiting in the dark corners of the internet, in secret basements where those white sheets are quietly being ironed. The KKK taught us this: the most dangerous monster is your next-door neighbor. Welcome to the greatest empire of serial killers in history. Here, hospitality is merely the moment your grave is being dug.